MSNBC just blew a hole in Trump's budget bill, and this one should have Americans furious. Yes, even by Trump-era standards. Welcome to Occupy Democrats. I'm David Reddish. Amid Donald Trump's floundering approvals, court setbacks, the disaster of Doge, and his impotence at foreign relations, one subject remains on the lips of everyone in Washington: his big budget abomination. You'll recall that the bill passed the House by a single vote and now toils in the Senate. That's a good thing, since more and more provisions of the bill are starting to come to light. Like this little factoid.
Now, as you say, though, there is this other issue getting national attention. I want to take people deep into the bill. This is page 514 of the bill. This is what it says. No court of the United States may enforce a contempt citation for an injunction or temporary restraining order if no security was given. What does that mean? That means that courts could not enforce an order blocking some of Trump's actions if the plaintiffs, those objecting, hadn't put up a bond, essentially, for multi-millions of dollars. And that, in fact, is the case for most of these injunctions right now before the courts. So a lot of opponents see this as an attempt to block courts and to block that action. Why haven't we talked about it on this show before? Because in order to pass the Senate, this bill has to have budgetary effects. This provision does not have a budgetary effect. This is expected to be stripped out before the Senate votes.
That's kind of terrifying, isn't it? And wait until you see how scary this gets. Stay with us. The silver lining, at least for the moment, is that the bill has stalled in the Senate, and for good reason. The Democrats remain united in their opposition to the bill, and some surprising Republican faces have joined them. Take a look.
Lisa, tell us about what's ahead now for the proposal. I mean, the big question is, does it have the votes to pass?
In the House, it does seem that these cuts have the votes to pass. The Senate is another question. I'm eager to get up there tomorrow to talk to senators to find out. But I also want to take people through how this works. It's an unusual procedure. First of all, Congress would have 45 days from the minute they get this rescission request after the president submits it to act. Now, Congress can amend it. It can pass some, but not all of it. And there is only a majority vote required in each chamber for these rescissions to take effect. Now, we do expect things to start in the House, but Senate Majority Leader John Thune said today he wants this to go to the Senate by the end of the month to move quickly. If either chamber does not agree, then this funding would actually be locked in. It could not be cut.
We know there's been a couple of issues that have been real sticking points for some senators, things like potential Medicaid cuts. There's also a lot of talk about this contempt provision. Tell us about that.
Right. I'm happy to take people through this. First of all, where we are with this bill, it's not just a big bill, and I'm going to keep repeating this. It is one of the biggest bills in U.S. history. So what's happening right now is senators are looking at the House bill. They can only spare 3 Republican votes in the Senate. Right now, that House version does not have the votes to pass the Senate. And I'm going to show you why. There are a number of concerns. First of all, there are a group of Republican senators who do not like the deficit effects of this. They say it would add too much to the debt. Another group concerned about Medicaid and the social safety net funding in this. And now an overlapping group as well concerned about the clean energy credits in here, which would be eliminated. They say their states actually need those energy credits.
Man, who would have thought that progressives would one day applaud nutbags like Josh Hawley and Rand Paul? We truly are in uncharted territory here, aren't we? It's crazy times, dear viewers. And yet, for all the crazy and shifting alliances, for all Trump's clandestine attempts at consolidating power, there remains an even bigger elephant in the room. And we aren't talking about President Taco's weight, either. Last night, MSNBC did an in-depth report centered on the budget bill's tax and spending cuts. What they found should truly sound alarm bells for every American.
If you're in the top 20% of Americans, you're going to get roughly a 3.7% increase in your after-tax income, really all from these tax cuts. But if you go all the way to the bottom and everything in between essentially leads you to the bottom, if you're in the bottom 20%, you actually lose $800. Why do you lose $800? You get a very small tax cut, and you get a very large cut in Medicaid and these other benefits that we were just talking about that affects the 20% disproportionately. So this is a highly regressive bill that essentially favors the wealthy, doesn't do much for the middle class, and hurts the poor. And then if you want to see this in stark comparison, if we simply eliminated the tax cuts for people making over $500,000 a year, which is roughly what President Biden was proposing, it would save $1.1 trillion. That happens to be just slightly more than the Medicaid cuts and the food stamps, or SNAP cuts, if you will, put together. So if we simply eliminated these tax cuts, we could eliminate these budget cuts on these poor people and end up, from a budget point of view, in the same place.
So there you have it. Not only is this bill adding to the deficit and trying to make the executive branch immune to court orders, it's also a monumental transfer of money from the poorest Americans to the rich. And not just people who are well off. We're talking about the super wealthy. People with multiple homes, private airplanes, a fleet of cars, golden toilet seats, or in the case of President Taco, a golden shower head. This is a bloodletting of income from the poor, a kleptocratic robbery codified in law that allows people with massive amounts of wealth to steal from the people who have little. Oh, and by the way, the biggest recipients of Medicaid and other government subsidies that would be cut by this bill are in red states. How does that feel, MAGA-land? You know, for the life of me, I don't think I will ever understand how people with everything could want more, especially at the expense of people who have next to nothing. How many houses does one person need? How much more does he need to eat? How many more exotic vacations spent frolicking on sand and taking Instagram pictures does a person require? On the other hand, maybe it's just about seeing the number get bigger. Maybe these people are such total hollowed out losers that the only way they can feel validated is by watching their bank account increase and seeing other people suffer. Whatever the reason, this bill isn't just an affront to Trump voters, it's an insult to every American that believes in equal opportunity and promoting the general welfare, just like it says, you know, in the Constitution. Contact your senators and contact the senators who are holdouts on the bill and tell them, do not budge. The American people deserve better than this. Let's make sure they get it. This is Occupy Democrats.